You already know what success is supposed to look like. A clean house, a reliable car, everything in place. It feels like a checklist you are expected to complete over time. A stable job, structured routines, predictable income. Everything looks organized from the outside. It gives the impression that life is under control, and naturally you want to get there too. Not just to live comfortably, but to be seen as doing well. Because appearance quietly becomes part of the goal. The problem is, what you see is often incomplete. It hides trade-offs, risk, and long-term pressure. The visible version is only part of the equation. In this video, we look at what is usually ignored, the hidden math behind modern success standards, and why it often leads to silent pressure over time. We don't really learn success from numbers or spreadsheets. We learn it by watching people around us every day. What looks normal slowly becomes what feels right. Friends set the tone without saying anything directly. Coworkers signal what progress is supposed to look like. Social media fills in the rest with curated snapshots. Over time, all these inputs start forming a picture. A quiet definition of what life should look like emerges. And that definition rarely gets questioned. That picture becomes your baseline without permission. It sits quietly in your expectations, and you start using it without noticing. The problem is that baseline was never designed for you. It came from someone else's timeline and constraints, but now it feels like your responsibility to match it. You begin measuring your progress against other people's outcomes. Your own context becomes less relevant, and your time horizon starts to feel compressed. This is where pressure quietly builds. Not from real risk, but from perceived gaps. The longer it compounds, the heavier it feels. It doesn't feel like comparison at first. It feels like falling behind, but the system was never yours to begin with. What you see is only the final outcome. You are not seeing the time, the trade-offs, or the uncertainty behind it. The visible result hides the full risk profile. You do not see the debt attached to it. You do not see the pressure that comes with maintaining it. You also do not see the compromises made over time. Those parts are edited out of the story. What remains is a clean version of success. It looks simple, stable, and fully controlled. Your brain starts to normalize that image. It quietly resets your expectations upward. The baseline shifts without your awareness. Without noticing, you begin to chase how things look. Function becomes secondary to appearance. The goal shifts from utility to perception. Flexibility becomes less important over time. Open space in your life starts to shrink. Validation quietly becomes the priority. The cost is not just financial. It also affects your time horizon and mental load. The long-term impact compounds quietly. You end up building something meant to be seen, not something designed to absorb volatility. And that changes how long it can last. Visual success is powerful because it is easy to process. It simplifies complex lives into quick signals your brain can rank. Over time, this creates a mental model of success without context. You can instantly tell who appears ahead and who seems behind. The signals are visual, fast, and easy to compare. Your brain treats it like a ranking system without questioning inputs. This creates quiet pressure to keep up over time. Not because of necessity, but because of comparison. The longer your time horizon, the stronger this pressure compounds. But every financial situation has different inputs. Income, obligations, and risk exposure vary widely. Comparing outputs without context distorts reality. Yet the same standard is applied across different lives. It ignores volatility and personal constraints. The comparison looks fair, but it is structurally flawed. Much of this is driven by how we think we are perceived. Nobody wants to look like they are falling behind, even when the underlying numbers say otherwise. This is where the trap forms over time. You begin chasing outcomes that were never aligned with your reality. The risk increases while the meaning decreases. And eventually you pay for it with your own time and flexibility. The long-term cost is not always visible upfront, but it shows up as reduced freedom and higher drawdown risk. The problem is not other people. They are simply living their lives based on their own choices. Their path reflects their priorities, not yours. The issue starts with interpretation. We see their choices and quietly label them as the standard. Over time, options begin to feel like obligations. From there, adjustment begins. You slowly reshape your life to match what you see, not because you need to, but because it feels expected, even when it does not fit. Even when the timing is off and the cost is too high, the adjustment continues anyway. This creates quiet pressure. It does not show up externally, but it builds internally over time, like a slow, invisible drawdown on your energy. On the surface, everything looks fine, but your available space starts shrinking. Your flexibility begins to disappear. Life starts to feel heavier, not because of actual needs, but because of rising expectations. The weight comes from what you think should be normal, and most of it is optional. These expectations were never required in the first place. You just inherited them without noticing. What you actually need is not the appearance of success. It is a structure that can hold your life over time, something that works even when conditions shift. That structure should match your actual life. Your income, your obligations, your time horizon, not someone else's version of progress. The goal is not something that looks impressive. It is something that survives volatility, especially when life does not go as planned. This kind of thinking is rarely visible. It does not perform well on social media. It is quiet and often ignored. But this is what actually creates stability. It is grounded in reality, not image, and it compounds quietly over time. Because it is not built to impress others. It is built to function in real life. Every decision has a purpose, not an audience. And that creates a real difference over time. One path increases pressure and risk. The other builds quiet security. One is designed for visual approval. The other is designed for long-term survival, and that difference shapes your entire life. You don't need to chase everything you see. Not every option fits your current risk and time horizon. Some paths only look efficient from a distance. Not everything that looks successful is stable underneath. Some outcomes hide volatility and unseen trade-offs, and those trade-offs may not match your life structure. You are allowed to choose a different pace. You can adjust based on your capacity and long-term goals. There is no fixed formula for compounding a life. Falling behind is often just a visual illusion. What looks like delay may actually reduce future drawdown, and that can create more stability over time. Life is not a visual competition you need to win. It is a system with real constraints and consequences. Every decision affects your flexibility. Every upgrade comes with a cost attached. Not just money, but time, stress, and reduced margin. And those costs compound over time. So choose based on what actually works for you, not what looks right from the outside. Optimization is personal, not universal, because the right system is the one you can sustain. Not the one that impresses others in the short term, but the one that holds through change. Success doesn't have to look identical for everyone. It doesn't need to follow a fixed template or visible milestones. Yet most people still measure it using the same external signals. The real question is not how it looks from the outside. It is whether your system actually works in daily life, whether income, time, and stress are aligned over your time horizon. Do you have margin in your life? Margin is what absorbs volatility and unexpected drawdowns. Without it, even small disruptions feel overwhelming. This part is rarely visible to others. It does not perform well on social media, but it quietly determines long-term stability. What looks successful is not always sustainable, and what is sustainable often looks unimpressive. Compounding favors what quietly survives over time. And that is completely fine. Because this is not a public competition, it is a private system you manage daily. The goal is not how you appear to others. It is how your life functions under pressure, especially during volatility and uncertainty. And that difference is everything. It separates performance from reality, and it defines whether your progress actually lasts long-term. You are not wrong for wanting success, but the definition you follow might not actually be yours. And that changes how risk and time horizon play out in your life. What you see on the surface is often incomplete. Outcomes are visible, but trade-offs are hidden, and those hidden parts often carry the real volatility. If you keep chasing how things look, you may lose what actually works. Stability, flexibility, and margin quietly disappear. And the drawdown shows up later, not immediately. A better starting point is your actual situation. Your income, your constraints, your priorities. Because compounding only works when the base is real. Real success is not the most visible version. It is the one you can sustain over the long term. And the one that lets you breathe without constant pressure?